Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to HOA and Karen's Stories and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? I wasn't home when the HOA broke into my property. 5 charter buses, over 100 people. Music blasting through the trees like the land belonged to them. They thought they were throwing a harmless community party at an empty mountain cabin. What they didn't know was that every step they took was being recorded, every lie already documented, and the trap had been set long before the first bus ever turned onto that road. By the time the music started, it was already too late. I don't usually expect surprises from my mailbox. At my age, mail tends to fall into predictable categories. Utility bills, property tax notices, flyers advertising things I already own or don't want. That kind of routine is oddly comforting. It means nothing has gone wrong. I live in Denver now, in a quiet condo where neighbors exist mostly as sounds through walls. Footsteps in the hallway, a television murmuring somewhere nearby. It's efficient living, convenient. And after a certain point in life, convenience starts to matter more than excitement. But that condo has never been my home. My home is hours away, tucked deep into the mountains of central Colorado. A small cabin hidden off an old spur road that most people don't even realize is still there. No streetlights, no sidewalks, no homeowners association, just trees, wind, and silence. That silence was the whole point. I didn't buy that cabin by accident. I didn't inherit it, and I didn't stumble onto it during a weekend getaway. I searched for it deliberately, patiently, and at great expense because there was one condition I refused to compromise on. Yeah, no, HOA, ever. People laugh when I say that. They think it's stubbornness or some outdated grudge against rules. But anyone who's lived long enough understands. I've seen what happens when a small group of people gets a taste of authority and starts calling it community. I've watched committees turn into private governments. I've seen bylaws twisted, reinterpreted, and weaponized. I've seen reasonable homeowners wake up one day and realize they no longer control the land they pay for. So when I looked for property in the mountains, I did what most people don't bother to do anymore. I checked everything. I pulled original deeds. I reviewed plat maps. I cross-checked county records line by line. I confirmed boundaries, easements, access rights, and jurisdiction limits. I made sure there were no future development plans, no hidden clauses, no gray areas that could later be used to say, well, actually, when I finally found the cabin, it cost more than similar places nearby. People asked why I didn't buy downhill in one of the newer developments. The answer was simple. Those places came with boards, presidents, votes, fines, and people who confuse proximity with ownership. My cabin didn't. It sat on independently deeded land, bordered by national forest on 3 sides. The nearest HOA stopped miles away, well short of the old mining road that twisted up toward my gate. Jurisdiction ended there. Cleanly, permanently. I paid extra for that certainty because the cabin wasn't an investment. It wasn't a rental. It wasn't a venue. It was where I went when I needed the world to stop talking. I didn't go up every weekend. Sometimes months passed between visits. That wasn't neglect. It was trust. Trust in the land, trust in the boundaries, trust in the idea that private property still meant something. That's what people misunderstand. They think absence means availability. They think silence means permission. They assume that if you're not standing there in person, you've somehow given up the right to decide what happens on your land. That assumption is where trouble always begins. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Thick, cream-colored paper. Heavy in the hand, embossed seal. Elegant font. It didn't look like anything from a utility company or the government. It looked important, designed to impress. The return address read Vista Crest Peak Association. I stood in my condo hallway longer than necessary, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at it. For a moment, I wondered if it had been misdelivered. Then I remembered something most people forget. Property tax records are public. They don't just list who owns the land. They list where the bills get sent. Whoever sent this had looked me up. I opened it. The paper inside was thick and textured, the kind people use when they want their words to feel heavier than they are. The tone was polite, almost cheerful, but polished to the point of performance. "Dear Mr. Harris," it began. "On behalf of the Vista Crest Peak Association, we are pleased to request the temporary lease of your beautiful mountain property for our upcoming community Summer Jam weekend. This private event will include families, music, and food. We understand you are rarely present at the property and will ensure professional cleanup following the event. We believe this could be mutually beneficial." It was signed by Linda Walker, President, Vista Crest Peak Association. I read it twice, not because it was confusing, but because it revealed something deeply wrong. The confidence behind the language wasn't loud. It was smooth, practiced, the kind that assumes compliance without asking for it. And one line stuck with me. "We understand you are rarely present at the property." That wasn't courtesy. That was surveillance by paperwork. I knew the name Linda Walker. Everyone did. She ran the Vista Crest HOA like a personal kingdom. Her development stopped miles downhill from my cabin. Her authority ended there. My land wasn't just outside the HOA. It had never been part of it. Clean title. Independent deed, no shared access, no community consideration. And yet, here was the letter. I replied the same day. Calm. Precise, not emotional. "Ms. Walker, I do not rent or lease my property under any circumstances. My cabin is not and has never been part of the Vista Crest Peak HOA. Please do not contact me again regarding this matter." I attached a copy of my deed, not to argue, but to remove any excuse for confusion. If she stepped foot on that land after reading it, it wouldn't be a misunderstanding. It would be trespassing. The email went out. And then everything went quiet. No reply. No apology. No argument. That silence didn't reassure me, because people who believe they're entitled to something don't stop when told no. They pause. They plan. And Linda Walker was very good at planning, so while she stayed quiet, I prepared. I upgraded the cabin's security system, not with alarms or flashing lights, with documentation, cameras that logged faces, vehicles, timestamps, and movement paths. Systems that backed up automatically, quietly, patiently, watching without announcing themselves. I didn't need to be there. If someone crossed that boundary again, the house would see it for me. And soon it would. The silence after Linda Walker stopped responding felt heavier than any argument ever could. Days passed, then more days, and nothing happened. No follow-up email, no clarification, no apology dressed up as professionalism. To anyone else, that might have felt like closure. To me, it felt like the pause before something moved behind the scenes. I went back to my routine in Denver. Early mornings, strong coffee, long work days that blurred together. On the surface, everything was normal. But in the background, there was a low awareness I couldn't shut off. The kind that comes from knowing someone didn't accept your answer, they just decided to ignore it. Once a day, usually in the evening, I opened the security app on my phone, not obsessively. Just enough to confirm nothing had changed. Deer wandered through the clearing at dusk. Wind moved the trees. Snowmelt traced thin lines along the ground. The system stayed quiet, too quiet. People who accept boundaries usually acknowledge them, even grudgingly. People who don't tend to disappear. And Linda Walker had disappeared completely. 2 weeks passed. I almost convinced myself I'd been wrong. Almost. That was the dangerous part. Right when you start to relax is usually when the other shoe drops. It was a Saturday morning when my phone rang, not an alert. An actual call. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten before I even answered. Mark Reynolds. Mark owned the ranch downhill from my cabin, about half a mile away. Former fire lookout. Lived up there year-round. We weren't close friends, but we had the kind of mutual respect that comes from shared space and long sightlines. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. There was a pause on the other end, not awkward. "Careful. Jake," he said slowly, "you up at the cabin today?" "No," I replied. "I'm in Denver." "Why?" Another pause, longer this time. "This is going to sound strange," Mark said, "but you're not throwing some kind of party up there, are you?" I stopped what I was doing. "What kind of party?" "Big one," he said. I just watched 5 charter buses turn onto the spur road. Full-size buses. They're pulling in near your gate right now. People unloading tables, speakers, decorations. Looks organized. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. My thumb was already moving, opening the security app. The driveway camera loaded a second later. 5 buses sat in a staggered line on my gravel clearing, engines idling. Side doors open, people pouring out in clusters. Well, kids. Coolers. Folding chairs. Someone dragged a speaker out of a storage compartment like they'd done this 100 times before. At the top of the screen, the alert appeared. Unknown vehicles detected. 5 license plates flagged instantly. None on my approved list. I felt something click into place. Not panic. Not anger. Not anger. Recognition. Mark was still talking. "They've got a banner too," he said. "Big one. Says Vista Crest HOA Summer Jam." The camera angle shifted as one of the buses rolled forward. A man in khaki shorts and a polo shirt stepped into frame, clipboard in hand, waving people toward my gate like he owned it. My gate. I pulled up the access log. 9:47 a.m. Forced entry detected. Chain lock severed. Keypad tamper recorded. They hadn't wandered in. They'd come prepared. Another camera activated automatically, this one on the porch. A massive vinyl banner hung between the wooden columns I'd built myself. Vista Crest, HOA Summer Jam. Private event. Private. People moved across my deck like it was a park pavilion. Someone set a cooler down near the door. Kids ran straight for the hammock. A woman tried to hang streamers off the satellite dish like it was decorative. Music started low, then louder. Bass thumped hard enough to make the railing vibrate. I closed my eyes for exactly 1 second, not to calm down. To decide. When I opened them, the decision was already made. I ended the call with Mark and activated the next layer of the system. Exterior lockdown engaged. Interior access sealed. Microphones live. Facial recognition active. Trespass protocol enabled. The software went to work immediately. Faces boxed and numbered. Paths traced across the property map. Entry points logged. Timestamps stacking cleanly and precisely. 70 people registered in minutes. Then 80. Then more. On one feed, 2 men wandered into my garage, searching for an outlet. They dragged an extension cord across the patio without looking where it ran. On another, a woman leaned against the deck railing overlooking the canyon, drink in hand, posing for photos with open air just inches behind her. One wrong step there meant a long fall. I didn't shout. I didn't trigger alarms. I didn't do anything that would scatter them or give them time to coordinate a story. I let them stay. Because every minute they remained made the case stronger. The microphones picked up laughter, music, fragments of conversation. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal on its own. But all of it happening exactly where it shouldn't have been. A grill appeared near the fire pit. When the lid flipped open, sparks jumped, tiny flashes. I watched a dark scorch bloom into the edge of a bench I'd built years ago. I noted the time. A man wandered toward the trees off the trail, disappeared briefly, then returned, zipping his jacket. That runoff fed into my waterline. I noted the time. Kids climbed over the woodpile, tossing logs like toys. One slipped and cried. An adult pulled him away without even looking at the ground beneath their feet. I noted the time. This wasn't just trespassing. It was recklessness. If someone got hurt, if a fire started, if a child fell, the liability would land where Linda Walker intended it to land. On me. That was when I made the call. I didn't yell. I didn't dramatize anything. I stuck to facts. "This is Jake Harris," I said. "I'm the owner of a private residence off Old Monarchspur Road. I'm not on site. There is a coordinated trespass occurring on my property. Charter buses. Forced entry. I have live video and access logs." The dispatcher paused. Keys clicked. "Sir," she said carefully, "that location isn't under HOA jurisdiction." "That's the problem," I replied. Her tone changed immediately. "Stay on the line. Deputies are en route." I hung up and watched. 20 minutes later, the first patrol vehicle rolled into view. No lights, no sirens. 2 deputies stepped out and scanned the crowd. Music dipped as people noticed them. Conversation slowed. A woman with a clipboard approached. Smiling like this was a misunderstanding. "Hi," she said. "Are you with the venue?" "No, ma'am," the deputy replied. "Sheriff's Department." The smile faltered. "This is a sanctioned HOA event," she said quickly. "Do you have written permission from the landowner?" he asked. She hesitated. That was when I activated the speakers. My voice didn't come from a phone. It came from the house. "This property is privately deeded land," I said calmly. "I am the owner, Jake Harris. You are trespassing." The gate was forced at 9:47 a.m. That has been recorded. The clearing went silent. Heads turned toward the porch, phones lowered. Confusion rippled through the crowd, and then Linda Walker stepped forward. Sunglasses on, phone in hand. Calm, controlled, irritated. "What exactly is the issue here?" she asked the deputies, ignoring the voice that had just spoken. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. It was just getting started. The moment Linda Walker stepped forward, the energy on my property shifted. Confidence drained from the crowd like sound being sucked out of a room. People looked from the deputies to the porch, then back to Linda, trying to reconcile the version of events they'd been sold with the reality unfolding in front of them. "This is a misunderstanding," Linda said smoothly, her voice carrying just far enough for people nearby to hear. "Mr. Tast Harris owns the cabin, yes, but he's not here. He lives in Denver. Everyone knows that. That doesn't give you permission to occupy his land," one of the deputies replied. Linda's tone sharpened. "I'm the president of the HOA. This is a sanctioned community event." The older deputy didn't blink. "Ma'am, this property is not part of your HOA. You don't have jurisdiction here." She scoffed, loud enough for others to hear. "You're disrupting a private event." That word again, private, private. It hung in the air like a bad joke. "You tracked his schedule," the younger deputy said slowly. "How exactly would you know he's not here?" Linda opened her mouth, then stopped. For just a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. "I mean," she said, regrouping, "he's rarely there. That's common knowledge." Behind her, people started whispering. Phones came out, but not for selfies this time, for recording. The deputies split their focus. One moved toward the gate, photographing the severed chain and damaged keypad. Another began taking names. License plates were logged. Body camera stayed on. I stayed silent. I didn't need to add anything yet. The house had already spoken. Now the truth was spreading on its own. A man near the grill set his tongs down slowly. A couple began folding a table they'd just finished setting up. Parents pulled children closer. Someone asked quietly if they were in trouble. "You're on private property without permission," the deputy answered evenly. "If you cooperate and leave, that will be noted." That was enough. People began drifting toward the exit in small groups. No rushing, no arguing. Just a collective realization settling in. They hadn't come to a party. They'd walked into a legal problem with names attached. Linda tried to intercept them as they passed. "This is being blown out of proportion," she insisted. "It's just paperwork." One woman shook her head and kept walking. "You said he approved this," a man said flatly as he passed her. "You said it was handled." "I never said that," Linda snapped. "Yes, you did," he replied. "You said he wouldn't even know." Heads turned. Another voice chimed in. "You said it was community land. You said it was legal," someone else added. Linda's composure cracked. "I was misinformed," she said sharply. "This isn't my fault." No one answered her. The deputies continued their work methodically. The crowd thinned. The buses, however, stayed put. Engines off, drivers standing aside, arms crossed, watching everything with growing concern. One deputy approached the lead bus and spoke with the driver. After a brief exchange, the driver climbed back in and returned with a clipboard. Paperwork, manifests, contracts. The deputy flipped through it, then his posture changed. Less crowd control, more investigation. That clipboard disappeared into an evidence bag. I knew what that meant. Buses don't show up in the mountains by accident. Someone signs something. Someone pays. Someone names a host. Linda watched that exchange from across the clearing. Her jaw tightened. She didn't approach. She didn't argue. She knew better. The party ended without anyone turning the music off. It simply died. Silence replaced bass. Awkwardness replaced laughter. By late afternoon, the clearing was nearly empty. Trash bags sat piled near the deck. A few deputies remained, finishing documentation. Linda stood alone near the gate, arms folded, phone clenched tight. When a deputy asked for her information, she hesitated. "I'm not a participant," she said. "I organized this." "Then you'll want to cooperate," he replied. That hesitation was everything. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. 2 days later, the FOA call came. Not from the sheriff, not from Linda. It was from the transportation company. The man on the line sounded confused more than worried. "Mr. Harris, we received a subpoena related to a charter event last weekend. We're trying to reconcile something." "Go on," I said. "There's a contract for 5 buses," he said. "The event host is listed as you." I didn't respond right away. "That's not possible," I said finally. "I didn't rent any buses." "Well," he said carefully, "the paperwork says otherwise." He emailed the contract while we were still on the phone. My name, my cabin address, my property listed as the event location, and beneath it, a signature, mine, or close enough. I didn't react emotionally. I examined the metadata. Created 11 days before the event. Author, L. Walker exec. It wasn't scanned. It was generated digitally. I recognized the signature immediately. Not because it was forged freehand, but because it was stolen, cropped from a public record. A fence permit I'd filed years earlier, same ink distortion. Same hesitation mark. She hadn't guessed. She'd planned. "There's more," the man said. "We did a confirmation call the week of the event." "Who did you speak to?" I asked. He read the number. 1 digit off from mine. A prepaid phone. Activated days before the call. Deactivated the day after. "And who paid?" I asked. "The Vista Crest Peak HOA," he said. "From their operating account." That was it. Forgery. Identity theft. Misuse of HOA funds. Premeditation. If someone had been hurt, liability would have pointed straight at me. I forwarded everything to my attorney. Then I requested the HOA's internal records. That's when we found it. an internal document titled Extended Community Use Agreement. My parcel listed. My name typed neatly, my stolen signature at the bottom. Never filed, never notarized, never approved. A fabricated reality. Within a week, the county opened an investigation. Then the calls started. Not from Linda, from other board members. Careful voices, nervous words. "We didn't know," they kept saying. One of them met me in a grocery store parking lot and handed me a thumb drive. Emails, messages. Linda writing plainly, "He's in Denver. He won't even know." I made it look like he approved it. No one reads land use policy. There was no ambiguity left. She hadn't misunderstood. She'd counted on me being silent. And now, silence was the last thing she was going to get. Once the investigation began moving, it didn't rush. It advanced the way truth always does when it finally has room to breathe, steadily, quietly, and with an almost uncomfortable inevitability that no amount of confidence or bluster could stop. What Linda Walker had treated like a clever maneuver, a shortcut she assumed no one would ever look closely at, became a trail of documents that refused to stay buried, because paper has a way of remembering everything people hope it won't. The first thing to land was the civil complaint, not dramatic, not emotional, just clean and precise, laying out exactly what had happened in language that didn't need exaggeration to be damning. Trespass, breaking and entering, forgery, identity theft, misuse of HOA funds. Each count supported by timestamps, contracts, access logs, and witness statements, all aligned so neatly that even someone skimming the pages would understand there was no room left for interpretation. Then came the call from the insurance company, and that was the moment the ground really shifted under the HOA's feet. The representative didn't sound angry or accusatory, just careful, measured, like someone delivering news that had already been decided far above her pay grade. After reviewing the evidence, she explained, the actions taken by the HOA president constituted intentional criminal conduct, and intentional acts were excluded from coverage. There would be no defense, no financial backing, no safety net waiting to catch them if things went badly. When insurance walks away, reality steps in fast, and suddenly, people who had been comfortable staying quiet realized that silence now came with personal consequences. Emergency HOA meetings were called, some properly noticed, others rushed and questionable, the kind of meetings where voices sound calm on the surface, but panic leaks through every sentence. Email threads that once included half the neighborhood went dark overnight, replaced by private messages and late-night phone calls that no one wanted saved or forwarded. Linda tried to regain control the only way she knew how, by reframing the situation. She called it a misunderstanding, a harmless community celebration twisted into something it never should have been. She insisted the board had approved the event, insisted she was being unfairly targeted, insisted that everything would calm down if people would just stop overreacting. And for a brief moment, a few people wanted to believe her, because believing her was easier than accepting what it meant if she was lying. Then she pushed too far. She presented edited email chains to the board, not fabrications outright, just carefully trimmed conversations where critical lines were missing, context shaved away until the meaning shifted just enough to suit her. She urged board members to sign affidavits stating they believed my property had always been considered part of extended community grounds, that this was simply a matter of interpretation, not wrongdoing. One board member refused. 2 days later, that same board member received a notice of violation for a patio extension that had existed for over 10 years without issue. The timing wasn't subtle, and neither was the message. Fall in line or pay. Instead of tightening her grip, that move loosened it. Fear has a way of clarifying priorities, and suddenly, people who had tolerated Linda's behavior realized they were being asked to risk their own finances and reputations to protect someone else's decisions. Resignations followed, quietly at first, then openly. People stepped away from committees, from boats, from responsibilities they no longer wanted attached to their names. That was when the county's white-collar crimes unit formally entered the picture, officially under the label of a zoning and financial compliance audit, though no one involved was confused about what they were really there to investigate. Requests went out for financial records, internal communications, and digital devices, and Linda responded with confidence right up until the moment she claimed her HOA-issued laptop had been lost during a recent move. That explanation didn't survive long. When the device was recovered and examined, investigators found what rushed people always leave behind: deleted emails that weren't fully gone, draft documents that revealed intent, half-finished messages written casually enough to expose what careful language later tried to hide. One message stood out above the rest, a thread discussing community access language, where Linda asked for wording that could imply rights without claiming ownership, something soft enough to sound reasonable if questioned. The recipient had refused and documented the exchange. That documentation became part of the case file. Then, unexpectedly, someone from the party came forward, a guest who had brought his children and genuinely believed what he'd been told, that the event was approved and legitimate. He hadn't intended to be involved at all. He had simply taken a short video that day, a casual clip meant for social media, nothing special, music, laughter, mountains in the background. What mattered wasn't the video itself, it was the audio. Once enhanced, Linda's voice could be heard clearly in the background, laughing, relaxed, unguarded, saying, "He'll never even know. He's in Denver. It's not like he has cameras up here." Forensic analysts matched the voice without difficulty: premeditation, awareness, intent. The charges expanded accordingly, and at that point there was no version of the story left that could save her. Linda made one final attempt to control the narrative during a recorded HOA meeting, framing the investigation as a witch hunt, an attack meant to undermine leadership, but frustration finally cracked her composure. "You all knew," she snapped, bitterness spilling through the call. "You just don't want to admit it now that he's got lawyers." That was the moment the room turned. Board members publicly disavowed her, some resigning outright, others submitting sworn statements describing how votes had been rushed, documents manipulated, and dissent quietly punished. Her own vice president, a retired municipal planner, submitted a detailed letter stating Linda had acted independently and with deliberate intent to mislead both the board and the community. The removal vote was unanimous. No speeches, no drama, just a line entered into the minutes and a chapter closed. The HOA's attorney contacted mine weeks later with a settlement offer, $370,000, no negotiation, no counteroffers, just a request to make it end. Linda accepted a criminal plea deal shortly after: probation, restitution, and a 10-year prohibition from holding any administrative or fiduciary role in any HOA, community board, or municipal committee. Power carried her exactly as far as it could, and no farther. I didn't return to the cabin right away. I let the noise fade, let the story finish telling itself without me standing in the middle of it. Closure doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from certainty, from knowing the line can't be crossed again. When I finally drove back up the spur road months later, autumn had settled into the mountains, gold spreading across the slopes, the air quiet and clean. The gate stood reinforced, subtle but permanent changes in place, and mounted at eye level was a small metal sign, simple and unmistakable. Private property. No trespassing. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. Cameras watching patiently, systems humming quietly. Linda Walker's name archived and locked away like a closed file, nothing more. That evening, I sat on the deck and watched the sun sink behind the peaks. No music, no voices, just wind moving through pine needles and distance doing what it does best. She thought she was walking into an empty house. She never realized she was walking into a smart trap. And if you enjoy stories where entitlement meets consequences, where overreach finally hits a hard boundary, make sure you like this video, subscribe to HOA and Karen Stories, and tell us in the comments if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare of your own.